Okay, welcome to another lecture on economic growth. In our previous lecture, we looked a little bit of the historic data, and we tried to introduce one of the most important questions in macroeconomics, which is why do some nations become rich while others remain poor and don't seem to catch on the train of economic growth? This is an old question in economics. It goes all the way back to classical economists like Adam Smith. He wrote about the wealth of nations. That's a way of talking about this question. Now, before we go into talking about kind of the more modern views on reasons why economies grow and others don't, let's go back to Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus was writing basically before the 1800s. So when he was looking at the world, as we saw last time, where real GDP per capita has been constant for most of human history. And so his theory of economic growth was trying to explain that fact, why economies actually don't grow in terms of GDP per capita. And so his argument was as follows. He said, let's look at a place like Great Britain. Great Britain is an island. The amount of land in that island is limited. And so as the economy starts to do well, and we have abundant production of food, then population starts to grow. And what happens as population starts to grow? Well, we have one factor of production, which is the land that we have to grow food, that is fixed. And so as the population grows, we are forced to go to either less productive lands or try to grow more food in the same surface area. We're going to hit what economists call diminishing marginal returns. The capacity to produce additional food goes down because we're holding the amount of land fixed. So in holding one resource fixed, your capacity to increase production becomes decreasing the more you're already producing. And so what was the consequence of this is that as the economy grows, population grows exponentially. Why? Because the more people you have, the more people are to have babies. That's the nature of exponential growth. We'll have more to say about that later in the unit. But food production can only grow arithmetically because of marginal decreasing returns. You have a fixed factor of production, the amount of land, and so your productivity when you try to produce more and more food is going to be decreasing. And so eventually what that leads is to a shortage of food. That shortage of food is going to lead to essentially an adjustment in terms of population in the form of either famines, where people are going to starve, or you're going to have people being undernourished, which is going to lead to disease emerging, or conflict over food is going to lead to war. All of these factors, people starving, sickness, or war, all of them will tend to reduce the population and so bring the population back to equilibrium. And that's essentially how Malthus explained why the amount of output per person, the thing about it, the food produced per person remains more or less constant because there is this decreasing marginal productivity of labor. You can only increase productivity so much because you have a fixed factor of production. Now, based on the graph we look at, and that was Malthus, and to give him credit, what he was trying to explain at that time, it was a good explanation. Now, what did Malthus get terribly wrong? Because we already know, we look at the data in our previous lecture, we saw that in the 1800s, with the Industrial Revolution, the real GDP per capita in England, started to grow and never stop until this day. So it's been growing for 200 years non-stop. So clearly, there was something that Malthus was not taking into consideration in his argument. And what was it that he was not taking into consideration? Well, he wasn't taking into consideration the Industrial Revolution, the technological change that came about. What does a technological revolution entail to? Entails to an increase in productivity, meaning now you can produce the same output with less workers because instead of you have the same amount of land, but now you have more tools. So now you have a tractor, now you have agricultural fertilizers, and so on and so forth. So technological progress leads to increases in productivity, an increase in productivity allows us to overcome this Malthusian trap, as is referred to, and lead to sustained economic growth. So we see in this kind of discussion about what are the fundamental reasons of economic growth that labor productivity plays a fundamental role. And so the question of understanding why some economies grow and some economies don't is going to be focused a lot on what are the reasons why productivity grows in an economy. Okay? So thanks for watching.